Jain Cosmology. Samson, would you
Yeah.
read it?
Yeah, this one I'm not familiar with, so yes, let's read it. So, Jain Cosmology, illustration of the cosmic man, or the Loka Prushra, hopefully I pronounced it right or somewhere close to it, can be found in many Jain manuscripts. Interestingly, the three parts represent the three worlds. The torso denotes various heavens filled with pleasure, and the legs denote a series of hell consumed by torture. The most important, albeit the smallest, is the circle at the waist, is where human beings can reside. Live history, India is where that's from.
They thought it was the universe is like a being, like a man. And Jainism, for anybody who doesn't know, Jain is Jain Dharma. It's an Indian religion, not unlike Hinduism. But
Yeah,
so
and I
yeah,
believe it's also shared through some of the Micronesian islands as well, if I'm not mistaken, even down into Thailand.
there you go. Yeah,
But I think it's fascinating in their depiction of the heavenly realms. They've got a place for the abode of the demigods and heavenly beings, but then above that are the liberated
Crescent moon.
beings.
What does that mean?
It's interesting, huh? So
Yeah.
this is the part where, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit tomorrow night, but just the idea of what the future, the people of the quote unquote elites of the earth right now are putting out there into the general hearing of the people is to build this reality where we live in the sky in the future. And of course, they're putting it all under the guise of being considerate of the earth and not destroying the earth, the whole climate change narrative. But in the past, the post-flood Nephilim were considered both rulers of the nations and also quote-unquote gods at times, and they were the ones that had access to the Vimanas. They're the ones that had the Pushpakas, were the large city-sized Vimanas that had large number of occupants floating around at different heights and altitudes. But higher than all of them was always the home of Mount Meru, or the top of Mount Meru, or the top where the head heavenly being was. And I don't think that this little depiction is any accident that it's making that look like an eclipse, because it was always at the very top was your Ra character. He was the head of them. He was the great celestial being over all of them.
Gotcha. So you just said something that made me realize you do connect this concept of the top of Mount Meru to the Mount Olympus, and I saw that written in other accounts as well from history that they saw
I talked
those
about that in
synonymous.
Home of the Gods, part 5 of my Investigating Babylon series.
That's right, you did.
Yeah.
So multiple, like dozens of heavens, but like you say, it's still a jumbled up idea here. They're still putting Mother Babylon at the very top as if they're above the firmament.
He's even amongst the gods. This is why the quote unquote rulers would said that they would assemble there out of all the demigods, of all the quote unquote Nephilim style gods that would be in their Vimanas in the sky above. They then would assemble at Mount Olympus, and there was only a certain amount of them that would go up to Ra's house or Zeus's house and hang out with him to discuss the affairs of mankind. So even within the demigods, the quote unquote Nephilim post flood, they had their own hierarchy basically of leaders amongst them whom were venerated by Zeus or Ra to that leadership position. And they all knew that they couldn't best Ra. He was above them. He had more power than them. And that makes perfect sense in a biblical cosmological model and a biblical storyline where Azazel is a rebellious angel and all these unclean spirits or post-flood Nephilim are just giants that are not actual angels. They don't have the capability of an angel. So that makes perfect sense why they would always revere him as the top deity, the head patron god who has more power than them.
It does make sense. Well said, brother. If you go to the next slide, there's some more depictions of this same cosmology that I thought were interesting, just to drive home the point that they thought that this was the world as we know it as a man, and the upper levels were like in the torso, we're in the waist area. So just fun to look at, but not exactly close to the truth, right? Closer than a spinning globe shooting through outer space. Who do we got next? I think Sean.
Yeah, and just so everyone understands, the Buddhist idea, the idea of the Buddha came as a crossover from ancient Vedic Hindu theology from Vishnu. So it's just an extended, modern day extension. I should say modern day. It's 2,000 years old, but comparatively to 4,500 years old, it's a more modern version of Vedic Hindu theology that was kind of morphed. But the Buddhist cosmology, according to them, that the universe is impermanent and beings transmigrate through several existential planes in which this human world is only one realm or path. These are traditional envisioned as vertical continuum with the heavens existing above the human realm and the realms of the animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings existing beneath it.
Hungry Ghosts. It sounds like a game we played as kids.
Well, no,
Hungry
it sounds
Ghosts.
just like First Enoch.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, First Enoch 15 says that the unclean spirits, the disembodied spirits of the watchers who laid with women, that they hunger and they thirst.
Ah.
And
Yeah,
they'll be up on the earth to torment mankind.
That's right. So this might be the most amount of heavens we'll see tonight. That's 17 or 16.
Yeah.
And then we got 8 hot hells and 8 cold hells. That's funny. Yeah, we saw on the last one there was seven different underworlds that they believed, right? But just to reiterate, Enoch 22 tells us that the underworld has 4 compartments only.
Yeah.
So we'll see a lot of other cultures that disregarded that, even though Enoch, 7th from Adam, was probably before all of these cultures in their depictions.
I'll never use icy hot the same way anymore.
It makes me think of more is not always more. Sometimes less is more. It reminds me of like they were like, oh, you Hebrews believe in 7 heavens? We have 17. It's like,
and then one guy goes, or maybe it's just 16. We haven't determined whether it's 16 or 16.
Right. They're like, well, my dad has $3 billion.
Right.
Yeah. Someone comes up and grabs the mic. They're like, it's 16. Yeah. We have 16. It's like, oh, it's just silly.
The 28 lunar mansions. That's interesting.
28 lunar mansions. I guess the Jehovah's Witnesses are even wrong.
Or are you thinking of Mormons?
Oh wait, is it the Mormons that say there's only 10,000 going to heaven?
I don't know.
Well, I think they've upped it now. Now it's like 100,000, right?
So the 28 lunar mansions is basically their astronomy. So it's the pathway of the moon through the sidereal month rather than the sun in a tropical year.
Gotcha. 28 days in the month of the okay.
Yeah.
Of the lunar phases, because it is a consistent 28, 29 day lunar phase, huh?
So they would call the mansion just basically the place where it rests for their observation point in that month.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they give them all names. So they have names like Azur the dragon, the black tortoise of the north, the white tiger, Vermilion the bird of the south. They have a bunch of different names for these things, which are kind of funny because they echo a lot of the beasts we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 that it divides it up into, and then those 4 are divided into the 28.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, we just want to encourage you guys that Jesus says in his Father's house are many mansions. And those aren't referring to anything lunar or anything Buddhist.
Well, remember,
yeah,
I just think it's interesting that the definition of the word cosmic that's used in Ephesians 6:12 is specifically the realm of heaven where Satan and the unclean spirits rule the sublunary world.
Gotcha.
So I think that's fascinating from a Hebrew perspective and what they believed.
Yes, sir. Yeah, especially considering if the moon is in a lower firmament than the sun, which we haven't pinned down completely. Right. But this one I dug a little bit to find. I remember just going through Google searches for hours, and I ran across, when I was looking up the Asian cultures, I ran across a couple pages that you had to translate. You had to turn on a Google Translator to translate those Japanese characters. And the object model Sumisangi, 26 inches diameter, 22 inches in height, that conveys the view of Buddhism, is possessed by the Ryokoku Omiya Library in Kyoto City, Japan, which celebrated its 380th anniversary recently, guys. Give it up. But a ball that imitates the sun and the moon at the end of the arm extending from the center orbits with a clockwork, and the sun and moon revolve around a giant mountain. Shumisen is what they called Mount Meru or Sumeru, right? In the middle of the world, translated from asahi.com. So it's a blurry picture, but this is something they got in a museum out there that's probably a few hundred years old. And
does that look like a ziggurat in the middle again?
Yeah. Well, that's their depiction of Mount Meru with the inverted ziggurat shaped temple mountain on top of itself.
It's pretty wild. It looks like the first Simon Says board.
Yeah, that's a pretty common theme in Asian cultures and even Mesoamerican cultures, that they would have the 4 cardinal directions as represented by 4 primary colors.
Yeah,
in some way or another.
They also tie to those 28 mansions. They're divided by those 4 beasts in the sky.
Okay. Fascinating stuff.
Interesting.
It is another little old school firmament model by the Asians there.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Would you read this, Sean?
So the stupa is a dome-shaped structure containing relics that is used as a Buddhist shrine, burial place, and place of meditation.
Gotcha. So
That
almost
nice
put
little jet at the top.
Yeah, it does look like that, right? And some of them they have 3, and some of them they have 7 of those little layers of the conical shaped discs.
But there's
right.
a lot of these temple structures, the corner pylons or the corner spires, they'll have a little sphere on the top of them.
There you go.
Yeah.
But encyclopediabritannica.com says the central structure consists of a hemispherical dome on a base with a relic chamber deep within. Now I wonder if that doesn't mean underneath it, as if they had a hollowed out space underneath, because they're relating this to the cosmology, right? With the relic chamber deep within, the dome symbolizes, among other things, the dome of heaven encircling and closing the earth. It is surmounted by a squared railing that can be said to represent the world mountain. So they built these temples, these shrines, these meditation places as representations of their idea of cosmology in architecture.
The thing that I don't think a lot of people, maybe I just want to say this correctly. The thing I feel like is so taken for granted in the United States and many Western, quote unquote, first world countries is the public education system. Even though we, in the United States, we may not be happy with our public education system right now, the idea that it gives children en masse exposure to ideas, even if now many of those ideas have morphed into indoctrination itself, but in other countries around the world, they don't have that. So like they'll still have, like if you go to India, there's entire thousands of miles worth of tribes and villages where they'll have these, but the average people are not educated in a way to know what these structures mean or what they represent. That was normally dedicated to just the priesthood to know that kind of stuff that worked at these temples. So this is how it can leave, even with strong, rich cultural history like the people of India, and they have these types of temples and shrines. And you would think, man, how could they possibly fall for, and support the Indian government creating a space program? Because you would think they would all believe in their strong, rich cultural history of belief and know that they're an enclosed system with a dome over them.
It's how powerful the deception is.
But they're not getting public education to where their culture was normalized in a vast, or at least maybe in the major cities they were. But I'm saying like over the past 200 years, like if you went to a country like that, it was not the same as a Western country. And it just that the level of education depended on either your wealth or, if there was some generous Christian missionary that come through, and set up some sort of Catholic church there and that tried to teach the kids something about the world. But otherwise, a lot of them knew that they go to the temples, but they don't know what everything that's built at the temple represents and why it's there. So it still leaves them completely wide open.
A big, cool building to them.
Yeah,
like they see that as
it's honorable to their God and it looks great and everything. But as far as knowing these details, so it just leaves them completely open for modern day heliocentric evolutionary science to come in and tell them, oh yeah, I know these ancient gods. This is the temple of the ancient God. Don't worry about what all those things mean and what we believe they used to mean for thousands of years, because you live on a ball in space that's flying aimlessly with no purpose through a vast void of infinite darkness. So like I'm just trying to help people understand, if anyone's questioning out there, how could these cultures believe all this so strongly and now in modern times also have space programs like Japan, China, India, Israel, things like that? Well, it's just in one generation, you can change what people understand by what you do or don't teach the children.
Sure.
It's not hard.
So true. But stupa is as stupa does, as GR Cleve in the chat said.
That's right.
Hey, this stupa, I don't know if I'm just hungry or not, but it reminds me of deep fried ice cream.
Oh, yes.
I have not tried that yet.